Thank you for coming to Where is Wall Street? Now you're funded, now you're not. I have Gia Morón. She's been a dear friend of me personally and of the expo for 10 years. I think we were her first expo that she ever went to for cannabis. So, and now, look at her now. Gia Morón, the CEO and founder of GVM Communications. And many of you know who Gia is. And I'm going to let her run the panel, but thank you, Sara Gullickson. Sarah's been working with us for a while, and she was also in our show a couple of times, and she did a dispensary workshop for us yesterday. Fabulous job, and that's the second time that she's done that for us. Thank you, Sara. And Matt Karnes has become a good friend of the show, too. He's founder of GreenWave Advisors, and he's been an investor and advisor in cannabis for some time, as long as I've known him. And then there's Brett Finkelstein that I met last year in Cannafest, and he's come back again to help us on this panel, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Gia, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really excited about this discussion. I actually had the conversation with Christine. I was like, I got to moderate the Wall Street one. Why? Because money makes me excited. And it's something that we need in the industry. And I'm not sure how many people are investors in this room or how many business owners, but it is often the question about capital and investing. And so I'm excited to be a part of this conversation. And I know that Christine quickly gave you all questions. And by the way, we have two speakers that are unable to be with us today. So we're going to occupy their time. But I would love if you can give a quick introduction about your companies, because I think it will help the audience better understand who you are and what you do.
Absolutely, thank you. So my name's Sara Gullickson. I'm the founder and CEO of the Cannabis Business Advisors. So I've been in the industry 14 years, and basically what I do is license acquisition. So the game has changed a lot as far as how you get a license. We started off doing merit-based processes where the application was graded and scored. Now we're entering into a lot of lotteries. But as an investor, if you're looking to get into the space, I can tell you where to put your money.
Hello, I'm Matt Karnes. I'm the founder of GreenWave Advisors. I founded the firm in 2014 to provide independent financial research and analysis. Prior to founding GreenWave, I worked on Wall Street for a number of years as an equity analyst. And beginning in 2023, GreenWave Capital Partners became an affiliate partner of Stonehaven, not to be confused with Stoner Haven. It's a fintech broker-dealer, so we are able to help companies raise capital.
Hi, thanks. My name is Brett Finkelstein. I got into the industry in 2014 where I co-founded a fund called Fido Partners. Fido's mission is to invest in at this point, the ancillary ecosystem of what today is a cannabis economy. We run two funds that are closed now for new investment other than follow-on. We closed the funds in 2022. We made 30 investments, and I think if someone looked at our portfolio or knew about the portfolio, I think we have everything covered in an ancillary end of the cannabis economy. We didn't do any cultivation or dispensing to date. Right now, we're looking at some more stuff in a new vehicle, more licenses, more cultivation, dispensing, helping the retail consumer as well as the retail dispensary in this industry.
Great, thank you. So Brett, I'll start off with you. What were some of the main factors contributing to what I would call, a funding crunch? Over the last year, things got a little tight. I think we all kind of acknowledge that, those have been in the industry. Was it the uncertainty of regulatory changes, or was it the investor sentiment? Like, was there just concern all around in terms of market activity?
I think it's a combination of a lot of those factors. Before cannabis, as probably we all had other stuff going on in other industries, we ran a private equity shop and a venture fund. This by far is the toughest industry that I've ever been in. If you add on the stuff that you just said, G, as far as regulatory risk and uncertainty, you add that to execution risk of a nascent industry trying to find its way. early on, total addressable market was a lot smaller, so I think that, the ask was a lot less for companies to get started, where we kind of played in venture or early stage companies. And I think now, as you see that the total addressable market is larger, and if you use kind of where Matt sits as far as the public markets as a macro view, we mostly invested in private companies, so we had maybe a wider lens or aperture, but there's so many other factors that contribute to where the industry is today. It's in a kind of a, I don't think it's plateaued. I think, what keeps us all going, and I think conferences like this and people in the audience, is that the demand for cannabis is there. Mm-hmm. It just needs, funding and fuel to ignite or reignite this industry to a asset class that we all expected it to be at.
So, Sarah, based on what Brett just said, what opportunities exist today for investors? As we begin to look at, people just look at the industry as a whole, but there are particular sectors that could be more attractive today than they were before.
Yeah, I think that, people are naturally attracted to touching the plant or owning a retail facility or owning a cultivation facility. And the reality of it is it's a very heavy lift to own one of those businesses. So, right now here in New York, for example, there's so many different ancillary companies that are needed to support the overall industry. Potentially you're gonna have hundreds of retail stores. And if you are New York local, I mean, I would say thousands and thousands and thousands of places to place your money. I think it's a matter of really figuring out whose business model you believe in, how you can be an asset to the overall team, making sure that their numbers aren't pie in the sky, and making sure that these are people that can execute upon a plant-touching business and or an ancillary business. I think that this is going to be the biggest market in the United States, obviously, until Texas potentially comes online. So there's more than enough opportunities. If you're questioning where to put your money, you're not looking in the right places.
So to that point, are we seeing somewhat of, will we see with the last 6 months of the year, right? Are we going to see a shift happen this year, or do you believe that we'll see it more so in the new year?
A shift as far as?
Like investing.
No, because the way that New York specifically is issuing licenses, it's on a rolling basis. So every month you're going to get 20 to 30 different retail facilities to potentially support and or invest in, same with cultivation. And if you're not on the East Coast and you're across the country, this year we're submitting applications in 8 different processes. That's my biggest year yet in the cannabis industry. So if you're not New York based, there's opportunities all over the country to potentially support as well. And new markets coming online. Kentucky's coming online. They were dry. So again, that needs ancillary businesses and then investor capital to get your actual retail and or cultivation facilities up and running.
So I'll ask the panel this, and any one of you can jump in. Are traditional banks still sitting on the sidelines, or are we seeing interest as of yet, or are we still dependent on the specialized financial institutions?
Well, I'll take that first. I would say that the major banks are sitting on the sidelines. They're unwilling to take the risk associated with an illegal industry. But below that, I would say most banks are banking cannabis businesses, at a high premium. I mean, the average cost is probably north of $1,500 a month just to maintain an account. But I would say, right now, especially if we go to Schedule 3, I think there'll probably be some language, if, short of safe banking passing, there'll be some language, whether it be in a Garland memo or updated FinCEN guidance, to provide safe harbor provisions for any type of financial institution, as well as any type of uplisting.
Well, you said it. You jumped the gun, because I was going to ask about safe or safer, as it's being called now. When do you anticipate, or can we give a sense on when we think safer will happen?
Gosh, I've given up on that.
I-
It's been going on for a
and I
long
think
time.
right.
And quite frankly, I'm not even sure it's relevant once we get Schedule 3 and if we have all these other provisions, as I just mentioned, FinCEN guidance and a Garland memo.
But just for clarity, in case anyone didn't understand, so if, let's say, we get to the point where SAFER is, has passed and there's availability for traditional banks to come in, do you think that's when we'll see those bigger investment banks jumping in, or you think that they're still waiting for federal legalization?
I think it's got to be federal legalization.
Yeah.
I think when we here at the panel or the audience hears about banks, I think there could be investment banking, new capital coming in, fueling this industry, or banks taking deposit. I think most of us would like new capital coming in, investment banking, merchant banking, new private equity firms coming into the market from out of cannabis. We see some stuff on CPG, we see some stuff on pharma. I think gaming is going to be something, or tobacco, but I think banking as far as deposits, for me, where I sit, maybe on the investment side and where Sarah and Matt sit, are less important than I would like to see uplisting happen. NASDAQ is kind of someone, that's got to happen on the regulatory front, but that's a private, organization, not really government body. We all talk about, credit cards and payments. Visa, MasterCard, the same thing. I think everyone is, kind of looking at this 280E as certainly for us being in this industry as long as we have, I think we need the government to follow through, and that's like one step. Maybe it's like a bunt single in baseball. It's not a home run, but I think that it shows the outsiders that we're fueling. We're talking about Wall Street, that will come into this industry, that something new is happening on the regulatory front, and there's a follow through. As Matt said, I've been wrong 11 times as far as calling when SAFE would happen, or SAFER, or CLIMB, or all the other new acronyms. And I think all of us have Stockholm syndrome, and like, how many times could you bring the sheep to slaughter and just wait? And I think that's what we're doing, just waiting.
Yeah, I've actually heard legislators say, give it like a 7 to 10 year run, right? Like, you haven't been doing it long enough, advocating. And it's interesting because when I look back at 2012, where we were then to where we are now, I guess they're right? It's going to take that long. So we recently heard the announcement. Everyone heard the announcement about rescheduling. One of the things that jumped out at me that day, and I didn't mention this before, so I do have a Wall Street background. I worked at Goldman Sachs for 15 years. This is why money excites me. But I worked in media relations. But again, just having that opportunity to oversee the announcements, whether if it's from the investment banking side, private equity side, I had a better understanding of how it works. So when I came into the cannabis industry, it was a natural fit. I understood what was happening and where we were going. And so back to rescheduling, when that was announced, the stocks went up.
Because
And
nobody reads.
no one reads, right? But
Nobody
everyone
wants
got
to read.
And so, Matt, this question is more for you. What do you think could be the immediate or long-term effects that you foresee with investing in this space?
So the first major implication of a Schedule 3 reclassification is the elimination of what Brett alluded to as Section 280E of the IRS code. And what that means is, for those who are not familiar, basically cannabis companies, if they're plant touching, need to pay taxes on, it's assessed on gross profit as opposed to pre-tax income. So what does that mean? So there's only a handful of companies that actually have pre-tax income at this point. Their effective tax rate is about 65 to 70%. For those that have pre-tax losses, they effectively have to raise capital just to pay their tax bill. So that just puts in perspective how enormous this onerous tax burden has been. And this has been going on 10 years. So this is why it's so important where we are now. we're at the cusp of a change to federal reform. The other thing is that I think is really important that people don't realize is that the way the tax code is now, these companies that have pre-tax losses are unable to carry their losses forward as not operating losses to deduct from future income. With the elimination of 280E, there's there's more cash that will be available through the NOLs.
Do you want to answer that?
And
No. Oh.
and then what I would just say is I think that this is a prelude to federal legalization. And I think that could happen over the next 5 years. Now the federal government, the regulators are stepping in. They're better understanding the plant, all the implications, health risks, et cetera. And that's certain boxes need to be checked before the federal legalization occurs.
This is just a question, just as you were responding. I have seen in the press that some companies, some of the MSOs, are actually going after to kind of get some of their 280E money back. What are your thoughts on that?
So I used to work at Price Waterhouse, so this really excites me. Actually, can't keep my fingers off a calculator. So I actually hosted a webinar, or Zoom, or whatever you want to call it these days, with a partner from Cohn Resnick, an attorney who worked at the DOJ, who was heavily involved in these issues. And basically, so Trulieve kind of, was a leader with all this. They filed a refund. Everybody's like, okay, yeah, so what? They filed a refund. I mean, I filed for refunds. The IRS told me to go to hell.
Right.
I'm not giving you
right.
your money back.
Right.
So they actually got the money, which was like a big thing. They got over $100 million back. So, because Schedule 3 is on the horizon, a lot of people, a lot of the MSOs feel like, well, screw it, we're not going to pay.
Right.
This is all going to be eliminated. And it's, as I've said, it's been a tremendous cash burden for everybody. So what's going to happen? So basically, just because you get a refund, and this refund caught those guys, the partner at Cohn Resnick and the attorney, off guard, because they were scratching their head like, how could this happen?
Right.
And it's very possible it was just a mistake. It slipped through the cracks. So Trulieve is recording this as a liability. They took the money, and it's uncertain whether or not they're going to have to pay it back.
Right.
And so, but this was the impetus for other firms to file refunds,
Exactly.
and it's not really clear how that's all going to play out.
Yeah, because I did see in the news, Curaleaf chairman also said they were going to do that, and immediately.
But not only that, I think, as Matt alluded to, people aren't paying the taxes. They're using the money because it could be retroactive. You don't have to pay, 2024. I think that's what Boris Jordan came out and said, that he's going to hold that money and not pay it.
So these are MSOs. When I think about the smaller businesses who actually feel the pinch, probably closer, right? What do we say to them?
Get a good accountant. Because,
Go to their firm.
I honestly, it's not really a surprise, and Boris even had mentioned this on one of the calls, that the smaller guys, the privately held guys, a lot of them haven't even been paying 280E, and if they've been paying it, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong.
Right,
they don't
right.
have the resources to go out and hire an accountant that's well-versed in this subject matter.
So I want to switch the conversation a bit because, when I get excited about finance and cannabis, and I've been watching the M&A landscape for a while, and at one point it was very active, but things have changed, especially over the past year. And so do you think that it's MSOs that are still driving the market activity, or do you believe that smaller niche players will actually play a bigger part as we go forward in terms of the M&A activity? And that's for anyone on the panel, yes.
You can start, Matt.
Well, what I would say is, so MSO is multi-state operator, right? That's kind of what the generic term is. But there are single state operators that are doing, actually a few of them are doing quite well, which can drive some of the M&A activity. And I think the M&A activity will come in all shapes and sizes. It really depends on the operational efficiencies of the acquired company as well as the capability of the acquirer. And I think as equity prices rise, more deals will be able to be made with stock that are less dilutive to shareholders.
Right now, for us, what we're seeing, so I have probably like 22 active licenses that are just like paper, that are like either looking to trade or looking for a JV within my network. And right now, we're looking at a lot of like single operators that have a very profitable store within that market that want to expand. And so the conversations for us used to go from the MSOs. That was our first target. We're not talking to the MSOs anymore. We're literally going to, you're one of the good operators in this space. Do you want a JV? Do you want another license? And that's who we're seeing the flow for like new paper licenses going to people, even here in New York. We had meetings yesterday where it's like, we're doing a really great job and we want to expand our brand. I think we all know that everything's going to boil down to the brand, whether it's, processing, cultivation, or dispensary as things, develop.
So it's a great way for me to ask, because I don't know, who's who in this room. But for a smaller operator, what do they need to do to become more attractive?
To be honest, like the single solo operators are going to get slaughtered in the next couple years. Like you're either going to have to put together a group of you that are functioning with the same CPA, with the same CFO, with the same controller, the same COO. And so I think it's like, power in numbers. And then the ones that have kind of like figured out their roadmap to success in that market, it's a matter of either acquiring more licenses, JVing with another person that just has a piece of paper and maybe doesn't have the real estate and funding to activate. But the industry is definitely changing. It's dog eat dog, especially when we have states that are like offering more licenses. Like back in the day, it was limited license markets, and you'd be in a population state of 7 million people or 8 million people, and there were only 100 outlets. That's a much, much different game. Much different game.
I think part of the playbook for a lot of the smaller companies is an exit to be acquired by a bigger player. And you could look back 2017, 18. There were quite a number of smaller operators that sold out then, and they're laughing. They're sitting on the beach right now. They got right out at the right time.
So I see some faces in the audience, and that's why I got to take my glasses off. Sometimes that's hard for business owners to hear because they work so hard to get that license, and now they're building up the company. And I understand an exit and a successful exit. I've seen many people exit at the right time and actually get the best price for their business. Can you give advice to those license owners out here that hear you say exit after they've worked so hard? Why is it a good time? Like what would be a good time to exit? And for those who are holding on to their business as though it's their baby, because I do understand the personalized aspect of that, realizing that an exit could actually fund the next dream.
Absolutely.
Yep. Oh, go ahead.
Absolutely. Like, I think this idea that your business is your baby and you're so attached to it and all that, like, I get it. I've been there. But at some point, there's a tipping point. And so if you have an offer that makes sense for you and your family, you got to go. And then you can take that capital and you can create your next, passion project or whatever that looks like. Get into a different industry, stay in this industry. But, sometimes we see license values go way up. And then the individual or private owners, especially in Arizona, like we don't have that many one-off owners anymore. It's all the big MSOs and the corporations that are running. And so what's happening is a lot of the smaller people are getting squeezed out, or the values are going down, and then it's like, oh shoot, we should have sold for 20 million or 18 million or whatever that number was a year ago. You don't want to be on the other side of regret.
Especially the. Oh, sorry.
No, I think that that on a transaction, M&A exit, there's going to be the acquirer and there's going to be a target. But also, who's on your cap table? What's the board shaped up like? The alignment might not be there between a founder who might not go on with the company as a leader or a CEO, might not be aligned with the investors. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, we've seen it before. We look at things we get it's personal, like Sarah said. But for us, all our net worth is not tied up in one company as an investor. So we have 30, 40 names spread out of the portfolio, weighted to certain industries, maybe fueling more capital in as they execute. You know, our motto is always investing in people, and the people would figure it out, but it's not our first rodeo as far as investing. We're there to help shepherd young companies, or not even young companies, but companies that are going to make a difference in the cannabis economy. I would say rely on those people that are going to help you. And I think, like what Sarah said, like a license is a piece of paper, it's value, but like where I live in Florida, I would see licenses trading at, you know, 30 to 40, $50 million. I don't think you could give away a license in my home state of Florida right now for $5 to $10 million. You need $100 million behind it just to compete with the market, not even compete with who's there. And I think that where's the disconnect of the market today, the market where it's going, how these companies are going to be fueled. When we started investing in 2019, we sat in a room in Vegas with other fund managers, and we whiteboarded all our companies, probably hundreds. Who's going to be acquired, who's going to be the acquirer, and who we're going to kind of not fund and let, you know, die, for lack of a better word. But, you know, it was personal to the companies that we were talking to, but people should have an awareness of the M&A environment, and 1 + 1 could equal 3, and it's so important for this nascent industry. As Sarah said and Matt said, MSO is so hard. It's a new business in every state. So economies of scale work, not only in ancillary business, I mean MSOs, but ancillary. We only invest in ancillary because we believed that we could scale. Companies could scale. They're not involved in supply and demand of cannabis, interstate commerce, pricing comparisons or pricing compression. But that didn't work because we always thought that that wouldn't matter to us as investors, but it does, because if the price of a pound of marijuana keeps going down, less money is going to be spent on the ancillary businesses that we've invested in.
One thing I would say, though, it's just going to become increasingly more difficult for the smaller private guys to stay afloat, because as we heard earlier, the illicit market is out there. It's working with a vengeance. It's putting a lot of pressure on everybody, and then couple that with the fact that the MSOs, once we eliminate 280E, the strong are going to get stronger, and it's going to be really, really hard to compete.
Fred, I was actually happy to hear you say that your company only invests in ancillary businesses, because I think oftentimes people, as they're coming to the industry, they're only thinking of the license owners, right? And they're only thinking of going after the licenses, whereas many of us have said from time, over the years, picks and shovels are actually going to win the race, right? And so can you just describe—
Hasn't won yet for us.
It will. Slow and steady.
It will. I was just going to say slow and steady. Can you talk about perhaps just some of these businesses within the ancillary space that you all look at?
Well, like we are super focused on people, right? So a lot of the stuff early on, we were helping shape an industry. So we looked at things that would be super critical to a nascent industry. So I'm going to give one example. We were really bullish on lab testing. We made an investment in a lab testing company. We believed that we could scale it. Lab testing is needed in a cannabis economy today. So that was kind of our focus. If we use that as kind of our thesis, it was invest in critical businesses, aside from people and management and size of the market, invest in companies that are going to be here to shape a cannabis economy that's early on nascent and what's needed. Lab testing to this day is, but like Sarah says, talking about licenses, everyone's talking about cultivating, dispensing, delivery, consumption lounges, kind of things that are where this industry is today, and less hyper-local in certain states. Lab testing, if I go back to that, is scalable. Lab testing is needed. It's hard, though. And it's a race to the bottom as far as pricing. We see it now, but I think that it's going to differentiate products. If we just, I could go speak forever about where we think capital is going and what subsectors, but weighted-wise, that was our first investment. That was our first thesis, and we kept with it, and we're still in the business.
What I would say is, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I wrote a report on lab testing in 2015 indicating that this is one of the most important ancillary businesses, because if you take a step back, what is important is what's going to be required by law, where I
Right.
think the opportunities are. And I know lab testing has been very difficult. Every state does their own thing. There's no national protocol, but eventually that's going to happen. As I was saying before about the DEA with the rescheduling, and now the federal regulators are going to look in, and I'm sure they're going to kind of look at these labs and figure out some way to implement some type of national protocol, which is going to be required for consistency and all that. And I think another ancillary business that is very important is breathalyzers. That's going to be required. Driving impairment. So anything that I think will be required under a federal oversight.
Would that fall under the technology sector?
Could be. You know, a
be.
lot of things kind of cross over into different, buckets.
And the reason why I say that is because we're constantly seeing new technology coming into the industry. And again, I think people think that when investing or looking at investment opportunities in the industry, it can only be within cultivation and retail, whereas there's a whole adjacent market that could be quite desirable. And
Even in service-based. I mean, how many times have dispensary owners or plant-touching businesses hired an attorney that wasn't up for the task, hired a marketing agency that wasn't up for the task, and spending money on social till the page gets shut down? So I think that even like from a lighter lift, because labs are expensive, obviously, creating technology is expensive, but even from some of the ancillary businesses that aren't that going to be that expensive for a current business to get into, to again read the regs, understand what it's going to take you to be. I mean, that's an easy business model, and it's an inexpensive one to support the industry.
so for those people that are sitting out here, because I think a few people have some questions, and I want to allow that for you all to ask your questions. 2 questions I have. I'm a business owner. I'm sitting in the audience looking at Wall Street professionals. I had a commitment. I had a financial commitment for my company, but then they pulled the dollars back. And this panel is, now you're funded, now you're not. So we need to at least address the elephant in the room. What happens to those companies? What do they do? Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for them?
Maybe look for a partner, a strategic partner, maybe look for an acquirer. That could be one solution.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, due diligence is a big piece of it, right? So if you're ready to get funding and then you don't get funding, there was probably a hole in the business model that the investor saw. And so, I think before you even start in the conversation is figure out your business, make sure that it's ready for somebody to fund it.
Yeah, I think also drafting on that, you have to know your audience. I think when investing, you don't, if someone's like us is only investing in an ancillary business, don't talk about consumption lounges or things like that. Don't talk about things that at this point in 2024 people know, like total addressable market. Just show people how you're going to win. That's it.
Can you stress that again? Because I get what you're saying, but
Well, I think there's a lot of noise as far as what the industry looks like, where it's going to be in 10 years. But we've had 10 years, and the industry is not in a great place, and there's lack of liquidity coming in, lack of liquidity going out. So I think the issuers are looking for capital should focus on what they do well, what the management team's going to look like. I think that where the kind of disconnect is that 9-letter word evaluation. Like, my business is worth something. It's really kind of where the funding source is going to tell you what that business is going to be. But again, people could be selective. You don't have to take money because there's this guy that says they run a fund and have a check. You should interview those people, have some power, talk to people, professionals that are going to help you guide, shepherd you through this process. And I think a lot of times now where the cannabis is now, as far as like now you're not, might have been happened from companies like us that would never say no. Like you saying the valuation is this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to go public, we're going to do a preferred round, and going to do that. A lot of those things never happen. So like right now, we're in a different time and place, and just build your business, focus on execution, build your management team, challenge your funding sources as well, and then I believe that money will be there. I don't say believe. Money flows to winners, and I think that if you build a winning company with a winning idea, with a winning board, and have a track record of execution, you will get funded.
Do you think people come into pitch sessions, with investors thinking they have to say, our valuation is this, we plan on going, because they believe that those are attractive words that will get the funding? And the reason why I'm saying that is you said just talk about the business, like talk about how successful it is, versus coming in and painting the picture of this dream that many of us, realize that won't happen. And I think people come in with the notion of, if we tell them that we plan on going public or that our valuation will be $100 million in like 3 years, they're going to want to invest in us. But
I think going back to the early days of the industry, going back to 2014, I mean, anything goes, right? It's a new industry. Hear me now, believe me later, right? And there was a lot of money that came flying into the industry, a lot of pipe dreams, and nothing materialized. I think now people are a lot more sophisticated or better understand the industry. There's been 10 years now of information to work through.
Right.
The only thing I would say is also in terms of a funding gap where we are today versus where we were before is with safer banking or FinCEN guidance, whatever is going to happen, there's going to be more liquidity that will free up from the banks that might be willing to lend now. That's been a problem, as well as SBA funding.
okay.
But I think now, if we use 10 years back as a benchmark today, 2024, that's kind of where we started our fund. Like Matt said, there is an analog. There is data showing that there is exits, there are multiples. If you take cannabis out of the equation, and you spoke to an investor and said, year-over-year growth or quarter-over-quarter growth, great gross profit, and then the industry, and the great management team, and some people are weighing in on, like, I don't want to be involved in cannabis in this industry. Those companies will get funded, I believe. There is money out there. The public markets right now are kind of sideways. They're up a little bit, but down from where they were, but certainly down from the highs. It's still a retail market as far as there's not a lot of institutional investors, as Matt kind of plays in that game. It's supply and demand. We hear news, stock goes up, but right now the M&A fueling or growth of this industry has got to come from, I believe, out of the industry, new capital coming in, and these companies will get funded.
I know you wanted to add something before I take 2 questions.
Oh, just like the sheer volume of businesses that we have to look at and invest in from 2014 is just, it's enormous.
Completely.
So the more states that come online, the more licenses that are given, the more ancillary businesses that take place, it starts getting more and more competitive. These investors can look at 25 businesses. So if you're not the diamond in the rough, you're not going to get funded. And that's why I think your point is super important, where it's like, build your management team, be flexible, be fluid, work with investors that you could potentially get along with, and not be so rigid in your thinking of like, oh, I won the golden ticket of cannabis. Like, I've been in the industry a long time and I still don't have one. Like, there's not like a easy way to do this.
There's no golden egg. Really?
No, if
There's
there
one
is, I'm
outside.
looking at it in the wrong places. The wrong places. It's been a long road.
So this now gives you an opportunity. I'm going to take 2 questions from the audience. This young lady here has the microphone. So if anyone would like to ask a question, now's your time. Because I'm telling you, I've got like 3 more questions I want to ask, but please.
Hi, thank you. I guess I have 2 little questions. Like,
Okay.
One is, you're talking about small businesses, being sort of hosed, but in the New York State market in particular, it seems like unless you're somehow cheating, you're only allowed to scale to a certain size. I mean, there's some legacy MSO medical operators that are getting some big licenses, but from what I understand, the market's trying to be protective to small businesses. And do you guys have a sort of countervailing view of that? I was talking to a CPA at a booth who said this, as soon as this 280E thing goes, all the major corporations are going to just swoop in. So I don't know. That's a conspiracy theory. But and then my other question is, we had our chairperson of the control board, Tremaine Wright, talking about all the stuff they're doing. But what do you guys as investors and consultants think is really going to happen with enforcement? That's a thing I'm interested in. One of the board members at the last meeting went off for like a few minutes about why they can't do any enforcement because they have no staff. Anyway, so I just thought if you could speak to each of those, if you have any predictions about it from where you're sitting.
First one was on limiting the small businesses. Which one?
Yeah, I mean, I think New York regulations are pretty prohibitive, especially for like corporations and things like that. And so I think that when you're trying to structure something creatively, who do you go to? An attorney. So there's creative deals getting done. There's creative collaboration happening that exists outside of just the sheer definition of TPI. And so whether that's from like an ownership standpoint, a conglomerate standpoint, or a JV standpoint, there's many different ways to create a corporate type strategy in the way that the current regulations are written and legislation's written. So I mean, you just have to outsmart the system, which is the name of the game in every state, right? Otherwise MSOs wouldn't exist.
One thing I talk about in terms of the illicit market, I think they're making great stride in New York. But that said, I could tell you, it was last week and even yesterday, there are 2 illicit shops within 2 blocks of my apartment. And I went in, yes, check, they're still selling illicit product. Outside, there were 2 policemen. I said, excuse me, officer, they're selling illicit product in there. I was scared someone's going to come and punch me in the nose or something. But the police officer said, oh, how do you know it's illicit, right? How do I know? Are you kidding me? So there's a decal in the front that really identifies as a legal shop. I think they need to be better educated. That's one thing I think needs to happen with the NYPD and any other law enforcement agency. But it is a really big problem, and I think it is a serious concern in terms of attracting institutional capital into the space. Forget uplisting, forget anything else. If you don't have the sales growth and you have this disruptor, that's a problem. So I think, while, as I was saying, I think they're making great stride, but I think they have to really step it up.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question? I saw a hand go up before. Don't get scared. Now's your time.
Hi, thank you. Gia, you're the moderator. You never get asked the question, but you have such a wealth of knowledge. We're both New Yorkers. I'd like to ask you that question. As a New Yorker, somebody that's been building up the cannabis market here in New York, who's been boots on the ground in New York, what's your pulse?
One, I'm honestly proud of New York. And while I know a lot of people are frustrated with what's happening, when I begin to look at, they talk about the 3-year anniversary, but the agency's only been up 2 years, really, right? Yes, there is a lack of staff there. There's a lack of education within the agencies across the state itself. I've had that same experience with Matt, where an officer said, how do you know it's not a licensed operation? And I'm thinking, well, clearly you're sergeant, and I'm a daughter of a retired New York City police detective. So I'm like, clearly your department didn't inform you on licensed operators versus non-licensed operators, because they should have a decal. And this looks like a bodega. It doesn't look like a real dispensary. And so, there's a lot that has to be unfolded. This was already it was one of the most attractive markets. It is the financial capital of the world, but it's going to come with its challenges. And I think there are a lot of challenges from the day it was legalized, right? Just going directly into legalization, and then the gray market, who are the opportunists, not the illicit market, but the opportunists that saw an opportunity to open up shop and begin, selling cannabis illegally. So the license holders that have received licenses, especially the card operators, I am proud. Look, we had a medical market here for many years and no one complained. You know, there were complaints, but no one really pushed the state to expand the medical program. And there were also no black and brown operators at that time, and no one seemed to complain then. So when I look at the card license holders that are in the market, there's going to be challenges. This industry isn't easy. If it were easy, we'd all be in it and we'd all be well capitalized. But I think that once we begin to continue to move forward, work through the kinks, any small business operator knows that you're not successful year 1, 2, 3, 4, and sometimes 5, right? It's going to take a few years. But I think that New York is on its way. As a born and bred New Yorker, I have to believe my state will get it right. But show me a state that has got it right out the gate. None of them. Like, we just don't have the perfect blueprint. And even if we take the mistakes from other states, when you begin to apply it to the new state, it doesn't always work out the same way, right? So I hope that answered your question. That's it? Really? Guys, we literally ended on time. Thank you so much. But wait, hold on. Leave them with one gem, because I want to leave this group on a high, pun intended.
No pun intended.
Yes. So something positive we can leave folks with in terms of investing in the future, or, you know, perhaps even seeking capital, what that could look like.
I think the trend of the day and what I've seen that I shared on our earlier panel is, like, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
Yes.
So we can, like, complain about how bad New York rolled out, or who got fired, or how many illegal shops there are. Or you can spend that energy creating something great, focusing what you're good at, opening your store.
Love that.
I think there's a lot to look forward to. I think a lot of the problems are behind us, not that there aren't a few that are going to lurk around, but I think by and large, the back half of this year is going to look pretty promising, particularly when Schedule 3 is finalized.
Yeah, I think it's so bad it's good. I mean, when there's blood in the streets, you know, that's when you buy. The demand for the plant and the products around cannabis are on an all-time high. I think last month they might have surpassed alcohol. States are coming online, medical and rec. As Sarah said, dry states are going to be dropping licenses, and the demand for product around the country and is always there, and it's getting greater. So that kind of keeps us going as far as funding this industry.
Smoke's out of the bong, folks.
Thank you so much to all of you, and appreciate it. And thank you all for joining our panel today.